Hey everyone, welcome back. It is Icon. Thank you so much for checking out another episode. Stage 2 was absolutely unbelievable, but today we're taking a peek at the new groups for Stage 3 as we're about to embark on Stage 3 group play. So in today's video, I want to take you through, I want to break down each of the teams, maybe give you an idea in terms of who I think is the stronger group, who I think will probably make it out into the winner's bracket from that group. I know that we have a whole slew of different things to work through before we get to that major, but it's never too early to start to take a peek at these groups. So if you haven't seen them yet, this graphic was released on Twitter by the Call of Duty League, which shows Group A on the top and Group B on the bottom. So when it comes to Group A up top, we've got Toronto, Dallas, Minnesota, Florida, Paris, and LAG. And then when you're looking at Group B on the bottom, you have Atlanta, OPTIC, LA Thieves, New York Subliners, Seattle Surge, and the London Royal Ravens. So just real quick, so you guys are kind of aware in terms of how these groups are placed. Essentially what happens is the two teams that were in the grand final the winner gets put into Group A and the loser gets put into Group B. Automatically, those two are slotted there. Now, from there, it goes basically team by team, and you pick which team is going to go in the opposite group. So since Toronto won, they had first pick, which means they decided to take OPTIC and put them over into Group B. And then since Atlanta was into Group B, they had the next pick. So Atlanta would go through and they put Dallas over into Group A. And from here, it just goes by the next team that was selected. So the next team that was selected was OPTIC. So OPTIC then selected Minnesota to go into the opposite group. Dallas was the team after Chicago to be placed into a group. So Dallas then took LA Thieves and put them over into Group B, and so on and so forth. Minnesota, NYSL, LA Thieves over to Florida, and so on and so forth. It just follows that same exact pattern. So when I look at this overall, the first thing that I wanted to go through and break down is the fact that the first two teams that were placed after Toronto and Atlanta were Chicago and Dallas. And I think Chicago is probably deservedly so placed into that third spot. But when it comes to Dallas, I'm not sure that would be the team that I would put on the opposite side, at least in terms of right now at this moment. I think if we look back to the performance that Dallas had throughout the course of the second stage, I'm not sure that they're as dominant as they were early on in this season. When it comes to the major, they were able to get a win over New York, but this was not the same New York team that we saw previously. They did get the 3-2 over Minnesota, but they clearly were not the better side in that matchup, hence the 0.1 control. If that goes the other way, they end up losing that match 3-1. Then they got smoked by FAZE, got smoked by Toronto. So this Dallas team is not perhaps the same as they were before. I think personally the much more dangerous squad is Minnesota at this point in time. I was happy to see that Minnesota was the 5th team placed into a group, because in Stage 2, before they made the roster change, they were actually the 11th team placed into groups when it went to Stage 2. So I think that this is much more deservedly so. If I just had to pick like who's kind of separated themselves from everybody else, I think most people would agree that this group right here currently is at least on I don't want to say a huge different level, but they're definitely on a separate level from the teams that are under them. I think that LA is going to be a story throughout Stage 3. I think they looked much better with Draza. I'm interested to see how that plays out. I think it allows Kenny to just go out and be that main slaying AR. So I'm excited for Kenny, and I do think that LA, heck, when I made my last power rankings video, I think I had LA Thieves at 9 or maybe 8, somewhere in there. And a lot of people were like on my case for not putting them at 11 or 12. And I think that this move will solidify them somewhere in the middle of power rankings. We'll have a power rankings video coming out soon before Stage 3 goes ahead and gets started. Of course, we have the teams that made roster changes. So when it comes to Florida, Havoc is back in, Slasher is out. When it comes to Paris, Fire is out, and Temp actually comes over from LA Thieves. I know Temp wasn't playing recently, but he went ahead and moved over. So there are, of course, there's moves all over the place. The last one would be New York Subliners. So Mac is out and Hydra is in. So if you're kind of thinking about those teams that are right underneath that initial top 5 that I circled earlier, you have LA that made a roster move right before the second major. And then each one of these teams have also made roster moves. So we'll see whose roster moves end up working out for the better, at least better than some of the other teams that have made them. If I'm looking at these groups overall, and I'm talking about which team is more difficult, I don't think that there's any cakewalk on either of these. But if I'm in Group A, I am much happier than if I'm over in Group B. Because if we're just taking these teams, obviously, if you're looking at Atlanta and OPTIC, those are two teams that can beat anybody on any given day. As we go down the line here, LA Thieves, with the changes that they made over to Draza, I know that we just talked about those, but LA Thieves look much better than they did just prior to the major, and they only had like a couple days worth of practice. So as they continue to get reps under their belts, I'm sure that they're going to get better with Draza on that squad now. Of course, when you're looking at New York did not have a very good major whatsoever. You could see that Clay might have been going through some things, but they got beat by Dallas. They got beat by LA Thieves 3-0 in each of those occasions, and they were out. But with that said, I think Clay's going to be rejuvenated. I think with the addition of Hydra, this is who we've all been talking about, right? This is who we've been waiting for. We'll see if he's the real deal. He's supposed to be, but we'll see what happens when you're inside, those bright lights, and now it's time to play against the best teams in the world, which we haven't even talked about LAN and how LAN is coming back. We'll talk about that at some point in time. But just going down the line here, next would be Seattle. And when it comes to Seattle, it seems like every time we saw a graphic with the Seattle Surge, they just kept showing how much better they improved and how much better they got from stage 1 to stage 2. So Seattle is definitely not a team that I would want to be playing with. They got wins over Florida. They got wins over Paris Legion, which, okay. But they played Minnesota really tight, and they were basically, it wasn't a close matchup, but in that matchup with OPTIC, that could have been a lot closer than it was. So at this point in time, I just would not want to be playing Seattle. I think that they're a tough team to beat at this point in time. And then maybe the only, I don't want to say pushover here, but the easiest team is definitely London. But even London at this point in time is looking different than they were before, right? In the match against LA Thieves in that second major, that elimination map, it went to map 5. This was not a blowout by any means. And then before there, they had a couple 3-0s. But London is definitely they're not a pushover, but if I'm like OPTIC or LA or New York, that's a team you have to beat if you want to try to get into the winner's bracket. And then if I look up over towards Group A, I like to take a peek at this just from Minnesota's point of view. I know I'm on a lot of their YouTube series and content and stuff like that, but if I'm looking at Minnesota, because I think Minnesota and probably Florida is right in the same boat, but if I want to try to get into the winner's bracket for Group A, you have to beat these teams. And that right there might be enough. If you're at 3-2, that's potentially enough to get into a loser's bracket. And then from there, if you can just maybe take one of these battles, both of these are battles that they should be able to win, right? They've beaten Dallas in the past. They beat Toronto before. Now, Toronto looks much improved, of course. But if you're thinking like, what is our route to the first seed? If you're able to just beat Dallas again, now all of a sudden Minnesota's 4-1 and they're sniffing the number 1 overall seed. So I think that same scenario plays out for Dallas and Toronto both. I think if you're Dallas, okay, let's beat Minnesota and the rest of these teams that were taken after us. Now we're 4-1. Boom. We have a path over towards the winner's bracket. So if I had to predict who's going to end up making it in the winner's bracket, I think over in Group A, it will probably be these top 3 teams. I think Toronto obviously is playing super well. Their play all depends on how well Bance is playing. You know what you're going to get from Kleenex, just that absolute cracked route man that's running around, getting first bloods, opening up hard points, making plays in S&D. You know what you're going to get from Kleenex. You have Cammy, who's been playing great. Insight has been a welcome addition to that squad, but what really puts them over the top is how well Bance plays. And then when it comes to Dallas, I know they're not quite where they were a month ago, but when you have Shotzi and Hugh and Illy, I don't think Krim's been playing well. Is he a top 2 or 3 AR? I don't think so. But they still have enough pieces there, especially with how well Hugh has been playing, to get them over the top in a lot of these battles. When it comes to the winner's bracket for Group B, I think Atlanta and OPTIC, as long as they don't look past some squads, should be 2 of the top 3 teams. Then I am super intrigued with who's going to get that 3 seed from these 3 teams. I think you could make a case for any of those 3 teams to be the last team in the winner's bracket, which is crazy because right before the Season 2 major, you would not have been saying that about LA Thieves. They took a huge step forward with their roster move. We'll see how Hydra looks and how the chemistry and how well New York Subliners play overall with Hydra on their squad. And then, of course, Seattle is always dangerous. They've been playing so much better like we talked about earlier. So when it comes to these 2 groups, I think the top 3 teams should be able to separate themselves for Group A. And then when it comes to Group B, if I had to pick right now, I would probably either take LA Thieves or Seattle. I think New York might take a little bit of time to hit their stride, and they did not look good whatsoever at that Season 2 major. So I think that LA Thieves and Seattle has a little bit of a leg up, which you could even say maybe Seattle would be that 3rd team just based off of their chemistry. They've been one of the few rosters that have stuck together throughout the entirety of the year. So we'll see if that benefits them here. But overall, it's up in the air, and I think Group B will definitely be the more drama-filled group that's a little bit more fun to watch. So down in the comments below, let me know, who do you think out of that second group, LA Thieves, New York, Seattle, who's going to be the 3rd team to make it out of that group? Do you agree with my estimation for Group A that it'll probably be those top 3 seeds? Let me know down in the comments. I'm interested to see what you guys have to say. So with that, thank you guys so much for checking out another episode. If you're new around here, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you don't mind leaving a like, helps out the channel. So thank you so much for that. And with that, we'll see you guys in tomorrow's upload.